I don't know who the artist was that you're speaking about, but I think that it's not like there's obviously like the play sometimes presents as simple, and it's not.
Keanu Reeves buried his daughter on Christmas Eve, 1999. 15 months later, he buried her mother too. For 2 decades after that, Hollywood watched him walk red carpets alone. Then, in November 2019, he held hands with someone at LACMA, and the internet lost its mind. But nobody knew they had actually met 10 years earlier. Nobody knew about the secret books they made together. And nobody knew about the Hollywood Hills house, where the quietest movie star in the world was finally building something that looked like peace. The address tells a story most people never heard. Keanu Reeves came into the world on September 1764 in Beirut, Lebanon, and even that beginning felt unusual. His mother, Patricia Taylor, was only 19, an English showgirl with a restless spirit. His father, Samuel Nowlin Reeves Jr., was a young man of Hawaiian, Chinese, English, and Portuguese roots. They had met in Beirut, where Patricia was performing, and for a moment their story must have felt glamorous, almost cinematic. At the time, Beirut was often seen as one of the brightest cities in the region, full of energy and style. Yet history would later turn violent. Just 11 years after Keanu's birth, on April 13, 1975, Lebanon fell into civil war, a conflict that lasted until 1990, killed more than 150,000 people, and tore Beirut apart. Keanu left long before the bombs and the bloodshed, but there is still something striking about the fact that one of Hollywood's quietest stars began life in a place that would later become a symbol of chaos. His name carried its own story. Keanu means cool breeze over the mountains in Hawaiian, and it came from his father's side of the family. It was a soft, beautiful name, and somehow it suited him long before the world knew his face. But the peace in that name did not match the instability around him. His parents married young, had him in Beirut, and then split by 1966, when Keanu was still a small child. After that, his father faded from his life in pieces. The family moved first to Australia, then to New York, and eventually to Canada. The movement never really stopped. Before Keanu was even old enough to understand what home meant, home had already become something temporary. That pattern shaped everything. Patricia raised Keanu and his sister Kim mostly on her own, and while she worked hard and built a life in show business, the household never settled for long. She would later become known for costume design and for moving through creative circles. But for Keanu, childhood was less about glamour and more about change. New cities, new schools, new adults stepping in and out of the picture. Patricia married several times, including director Paul Aaron, then rock promoter Robert Miller, and later Jack Bond. Each marriage brought another shift, another adjustment, another man who was there for a while and then gone. By his teens, Keanu had already lived across 4 countries: Lebanon, Australia, the United States, and Canada. That kind of life teaches a person how to adapt, but it also leaves them without anything solid to stand on. The deepest absence, though, was always his father. Samuel had his own troubles, and those troubles grew heavier with time. Keanu later described the break with real pain because it was not one clean ending. It was a slow disappearance. There were visits when he was younger, including time in Hawaii, where he saw a different side of his father and held on to whatever connection still remained. One memory from that time almost turned tragic. During a visit near the ocean, Keanu was nearly swept away by a sudden rush of water near a lava cliff, and Samuel grabbed him in time. For a moment, it must have felt like his father was still there to save him. But that feeling did not last. Their final meeting happened when Keanu was around 13. They sat together on a veranda, looking out into the dark with almost nothing left to say. The next morning, Samuel took him to the airport, and that was it. The silence after that stretched for decades. While Keanu was growing up, his father's life kept falling apart. Years later, in 1992, Samuel was arrested at Hilo Airport in Hawaii for trying to sell heroin. He was convicted and given a 10-year sentence, though he was paroled after a few years. In prison, he earned his GED and wrote letters to his son, but Keanu did not return. By then, the distance was not just emotional, it was final. Samuel later admitted that Keanu had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with him. Keanu would eventually describe his father's life as tragic, and there was weight in that word. It was not spoken with rage. It sounded more like sorrow mixed with acceptance. All of this made school even harder. By the time Keanu was a teenager in Toronto, his education had become another unstable thing in an already unstable life. He went through 4 different high schools and never found a place where he fit. He studied at De La Salle, Avondale, Etobicoke School of the Arts, Jarvis Collegiate, and Toronto School of the Arts. But the path never stayed straight. He struggled with dyslexia, which made reading difficult and made teachers underestimate him. Some saw him as troubled. Some simply saw no future in him at all. He was bright, but he learned differently, and in schools that often punish what they do not understand. That difference became a burden. He was even expelled from one art school for behavior issues. By 17, he dropped out without a diploma. Yet even there, something important was taking shape. Hockey became one of the first things that gave him purpose. He played goalie and earned the nickname The Wall because he was so hard to score against. For a while, that dream felt real. He loved the game and imagined a future in it, maybe even one day playing at the highest level. He was good enough to draw real attention, and that mattered for a kid who had spent so much of life feeling unanchored. But then a knee injury ended that dream. And just like that, the path he had been leaning toward disappeared. It could have broken him, but instead, it pushed him somewhere else. Around 15, acting began to pull him in. Years later, that shift would seem almost unbelievable. The boy who struggled in school, moved too often, and lost his first dream on the ice would go on to become one of the most recognizable faces in the world. Still, there was nothing glamorous about the start. After dropping out, Keanu had to survive. He moved into a small apartment and took whatever work he could find. He worked at a pasta shop called Pastissima and made huge amounts of fresh pasta every day. He sharpened skates at a rink. He did landscaping work, even climbing trees with a rope and chainsaw just to get by. By 18, he had become manager of the pasta shop, which says a lot about how seriously he worked when he cared about something. But the moment he landed his first play, he left. Later, he would say he never really had a normal job again. Looking back now, it sounds like the early pages of a film script. At the time, it was simply survival. Acting did not arrive with fireworks. It came slowly, through community theater, tiny television roles, and commercial work that barely hinted at what was coming. He appeared in local productions in Toronto and picked up small parts on Canadian television. He even showed up in a Tim Hortons commercial, long before the world knew his name. There was no family machine opening doors for him, no giant push from Hollywood. He just kept going to auditions, reading scripts in cafes, and showing up. That steady effort mattered because it built something stronger than quick hype. It built endurance. Then came the leap that changed everything. In 1986, at 22, Keanu packed his 1969 Volvo and drove from Toronto to Los Angeles with very little money and no real safety net. He stayed with Paul Aaron, who had once been his stepfather and was still part of his life, and from there, he started trying to break into the American industry. Even with help, nothing was easy. Los Angeles was harsher, more expensive, and full of people chasing the same dream. Keanu was still just a young actor with some Canadian credits and a lot to prove. But he had something casting directors noticed almost right away. There was a quiet intensity in him. He did not push too hard, and he did not seem desperate to impress. That actually made him stand out more. His first real feature film role came in Youngblood in 1986, a hockey drama starring Rob Lowe and Patrick Swayze. Keanu played a goalie, which fit naturally because hockey was already part of him. The film was not a huge hit, but it gave him real screen experience and put him beside established actors. More importantly, it showed that he could carry physical emotion on camera. Soon after, he appeared in River's Edge, and that film changed the conversation around him. It was darker, more serious, and much harder to shake off. Keanu played Matt, a teenager torn between a broken friend group and his own moral line, and critics began to notice that he could do much more than play the nice kid in the background. That role cracked something open. Hollywood started to see depth in him. Then, just as that serious image was beginning to form, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure arrived in 1989 and made him famous in a completely different way. Suddenly, he was Ted, the lovable slacker with the goofy voice and easy charm. The film became a hit and put him deep into pop culture. But success brought a new problem. People started to worry he would be stuck there forever. Studios saw him as the surfer guy, the sweet fool, the laid-back teen who could make people laugh, but maybe not much more. Keanu understood that danger, and it stayed with him. He did not want to become one note. He did not want the whole world to decide who he was before he had the chance to grow. That is why the next phase mattered so much. In 1991, Point Break gave him a different kind of role. He played Johnny Utah, an FBI agent thrown into a world of surfers, danger, and obsession. The film had action, style, speed, and real tension. But it also let Keanu bring vulnerability into a tougher part. He was no longer just the sweet oddball. He was becoming a leading man. The film made money, built a loyal following, and started shifting the way the industry saw him. Then Speed arrived in 1994 and changed his career completely. As Jack Traven, the cop trying to stop a bomb rigged to explode if a bus slowed below 50 miles per hour, Keanu became an action star in full. The film was a massive success, and overnight, he was no longer the guy people were still figuring out. He was bankable, but even at that point, when Hollywood usually expects total obedience, he made the kind of choice that almost no one makes. After Speed became a blockbuster, the studio offered him a huge sum to return for Speed 2. It was the kind of paycheck most actors would grab without hesitation. Keanu turned it down. He read the script and simply did not believe in it. He did not think it worked, so he walked away, even though it cost him millions and reportedly angered powerful people at the studio. There were whispers that the decision hurt him behind the scenes, that he was quietly punished for saying no. Whether all of that is true or not, the result is clear. The years after Speed were rougher than people remember. Instead of jumping straight into another giant franchise, he spent time with his band Dog Star, touring and playing bass, while Hollywood expected him to chase bigger checks. At the same time, some of his films from the mid-1990s struggled. Johnny Mnemonic underperformed. Chain Reaction failed to impress. Critics began asking whether his momentum had stalled. The same industry that had lifted him quickly was now looking for reasons to doubt him. And yet, this is one of the most important things about Keanu Reeves. He did not seem to panic. He kept moving. He kept working. He waited for the right thing. That right thing became The Matrix. The role of Neo, almost went to someone else. Will Smith was approached first, but he passed. That left the door open, and Keanu stepped through it. When The Matrix came out in 1999, it did not just become a hit. It changed the shape of science fiction in mainstream film. Keanu's performance gave Neo stillness, confusion, longing, and force all at once. He was not trying to be loud. He let the mystery breathe. The film made hundreds of millions, became a cultural event, and turned him into something even bigger than an action star. He became an icon. What made the Matrix story even more remarkable was how smart the deal became. Keanu did not rely only on a big upfront salary. He had back-end points, which meant the real money came as the films succeeded. Across the trilogy, those earnings exploded. Reports over the years have put his total take in the range of hundreds of millions. Yet what stands out even more is what he did with some of it. According to long-repeated accounts, he gave up a significant portion of his profits so key members of the effects and costume teams could be better rewarded. Whether people discuss the exact number or not, the story fits the pattern of who he has shown himself to be. He has never carried himself like a man obsessed with squeezing every dollar out of fame. That same pattern appears again and again when people talk about his life off-screen. He is known for living more modestly than many stars at his level. He helped his mother before buying for himself. He supported his sister Kim during her battle with leukemia and donated large sums connected to cancer research and hospitals. And all of that sits beside a private life marked by pain. His close friend River Phoenix died in 1993. In 1999, the daughter he was expecting with Jennifer Syme was stillborn. Then, in 2001, Jennifer died in a car crash. These were not small losses. They were devastating ones, arriving on top of the instability and absence that had shaped his early years. In 1998, when The Matrix was lifting Keanu Reeves into a new level of fame, he walked into a party connected to his band, Dogstar, and met Jennifer Syme. She was working behind the scenes in Hollywood as a personal assistant, first to guitarist Dave Navarro, and later in David Lynch's world too. People around them noticed the shift in Keanu almost right away because he did not act like a man making small talk at a noisy party. He acted like someone who had finally found a person who made the room quiet. Friends later said he fell hard, and Keanu himself shared that he felt real happiness after years of feeling alone. What made it stick was not the party lights or the music, but what came after. They kept seeing each other, and they did not bond through flashy dates. They bonded through the stuff they actually loved, books that kept them up late, songs they wanted to replay, films they argued about and then laughed about. They dated steadily into 1999, and even Jennifer's mom hinted that they knew each other longer. But that night was still the spark that turned the connection into something real. By the time Jennifer was expecting their baby, Ava, due in early 2000, it looked like they were stepping into a new chapter together. In the middle of Keanu's peak fame, this love stood out because it did not look like a headline romance. It looked like home. Then December arrived, and everything turned cold in a way neither of them could prepare for. On December 24, 1999, Jennifer went to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. She was 8 months pregnant. That day, their daughter, Ava Archer Syme Reeves, was delivered stillborn. Reports often point to placental abruption, when the placenta detaches too early and the baby loses oxygen. The words sound clinical, but the moment was not. Both parents collapsed under grief that hit like a wall. Keanu buried Ava at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery, and from that point, nothing felt normal again. Jennifer did not recover in the way people expect from movies, where time smooths the edges quickly. She sank into deep postpartum depression, and the pain stayed close to her skin. Keanu tried to survive it the only way he knew how, by working, by moving, by throwing himself into the Matrix world again. Still, even while filming, he kept checking on her quietly. He did not make a show of it. He just stayed nearby in the ways he could. But grief is heavy, and it sits between two people at the table, even when neither wants it there. Within weeks after Ava's death, they split. Not because they stopped caring, but because the pain kept tearing at them from the inside. Even after the breakup, the story did not simply end. By early 2001, they were orbiting each other again, pulled back by the same bond that had made them feel safe in the first place. On April 1st, 2001, they shared brunch at Crepes on Cole in San Francisco, and to anyone looking from a distance, it could have seemed like a soft restart. Keanu later told police they were back together. Yet the grief had never left the room. Jennifer was still struggling with depression, and she was also dealing with back pain from a prior crash. At the same time, stories circulated that she blamed herself, and that old choices and old wounds were feeding the guilt. It was love under pressure, and it was trying to breathe through a storm. That same night, April 1st, Jennifer went to Marilyn Manson's party in Hollywood. Later, she went home, and then, in the early hours of April 2001, she drove again. She was 28 years old. Her Jeep Grand Cherokee slammed into 3 parked cars on Cahuenga Boulevard in Los Angeles. She was not wearing a seatbelt, she was partially ejected, and she died instantly at the scene. Toxicology reports said cocaine was in her blood. Investigators also found rolled dollar bills with powder and pills, including a muscle relaxant and an anticonvulsant, which fit with the story of her treating pain while also drowning in depression after the stillbirth. When Keanu heard the news through her mother, he called the Los Angeles coroner's office and offered to identify her body, but the identification had already been handled. 15 months after losing Ava, he lost Jennifer too, and this time there was no warning at all. A few days later, on April 6, 2001, there was a funeral at Good Shepherd Church in Beverly Hills. Keanu was a pallbearer. Dave Navarro was there, and so were Scott Coffey, Scott Ian, and David Lynch. People who saw it said Keanu sobbed openly as he carried Jennifer's coffin, even though he had a reputation for keeping his grief private. There were songs played that day, including Barbra Streisand's Higher Ground and Bette Midler's Wind Beneath My Wings. David Lynch showed photos from Jennifer's life. Afterward, she was buried next to Ava at Westwood Village Memorial Park. The image of them together in the ground is the kind of detail that stays with people because it turns the whole story into one long, aching line. Later that same year, David Lynch carried Jennifer's name into art. His 2001 film, Mulholland Drive, includes a dedication to Jennifer Syme in the closing credits, and it is still there. The film's mood of loss and shifting identity makes the tribute feel even heavier when you know the backstory. The dedication was quiet, not loud, and that matched the way Jennifer moved through that circle. She mattered, and the people around her wanted the world to remember that. Years after all of this, Keanu said something that helped people understand why he never speaks about these losses like a man who has moved on. In a 2006 Parade magazine interview, he said, "Grief changes shape, but it never ends. People have a misconception that you can deal with it and say, 'It's gone, and I'm better.' They're wrong. When the people you love are gone, you're alone." It was not a performance line. It sounded like a truth he carried daily. When people read it, they did not just think of a celebrity quote. They thought of a man who had buried a child on Christmas Eve, and then buried the child's mother not long after. Around this same era, another part of his life was shaping him in a different way, and it started long before the tragedies. His younger sister, Kim Reeves, had been diagnosed with leukemia in 1991, and her fight stretched across a decade. It meant chemo, transplants, long hospital days, and the kind of fear that follows a family into every quiet moment. When The Matrix exploded in 1999, Keanu earned huge money from it. One widely shared figure says he made $45 million, with $10 million upfront and $35 million in back end after the film grossed about $463 million worldwide. What matters is what he did next. In a 2009 Ladies' Home Journal interview, he said, "My younger sister had leukemia. Today she is cured, and I donated 70% of my gains from The Matrix to hospitals that treat leukemia." That number is often reported as about $31.5 million. He did not build a spotlight around the giving. In the early 2000s, he started a private foundation without his name attached to it, and it has been said to support children's cancer wards and leukemia research. Even when people found out pieces of it later, it still did not come with a big victory lap. It looked more like a promise kept quietly. In 2020, he even auctioned a date with himself for Camp Rainbow Gold and raised $16,000 in a single night. And even that felt low-key compared to what most stars do when they want attention. What makes this part hit harder is the timing. In 1999 to 2001, he was holding two realities at once. Kim was moving toward remission after years of suffering, and at the same time, Keanu was living through the stillbirth of Ava on December 24, 1999, and then Jennifer's death on April 2, 2001. It was a stretch of life where one door opened and another slammed shut, and he seemed to come out of it with a different view of what money was for. Some stories even say he funded Kim's home and traveled quietly, and supported her healing without turning it into a public story. Reports about Kim later describe her as living more privately, spending time in Italy, and using her experience to push support and early detection. But the steady thread stays the same. Keanu did not treat the decade of sickness as a chapter he could close. He treated it like a reason to help others not feel alone in hospital hallways. As time moved on, he also kept showing this pattern with the people who worked beside him. During talks around The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions in the early 2000s, stories spread that he gave up back-end points worth about $75 million, and that he shared money with special effects and costume crew, sometimes described as nearly $1 million each, across dozens of people. It did not come from a press release. It came from co-workers talking years later. In the same spirit, he made pay moves that surprised Hollywood. For The Devil's Advocate in 1997, he reportedly deferred $2 million of his salary so the production could afford Al Pacino. Then, in 2000, for The Replacements, he reportedly took a major pay cut to help bring Gene Hackman on board. These are not the choices of someone who treats money like the main prize. They read like choices of someone chasing the right work and the right people. Even the way he moves through the world keeps feeding that image. There are constant stories of him using public transport, being seen on subways, and sitting in normal spots without an entourage. The exact net worth numbers people throw around change depending on the source. But the point is not the total. The point is that he never built his life to look like the total. Then, when Hollywood started acting like it had moved on from him, he did something that looked risky on the surface, but ended up becoming another turning point. In 2012, Chad Stahelski and David Leitch, both connected to stunt work and action design from the Matrix era, brought him the John Wick script after they acquired the rights. The project did not come wrapped in guaranteed prestige. Lionsgate backed it on a budget often said to be around $20 to $30 million, and Keanu's upfront pay was reported as much lower than his Matrix-era money, sometimes described as $1 to $2 million. Still, he leaned in fully. He trained daily for months with work that included jiu-jitsu, judo throws, and intense shooting drills that demanded speed and control. Crew members have said he did most of his stunts himself, and they describe him as someone who memorized choreography like it mattered to his bones, not just his career. The film shot in New York from March 19 to June 2014. It premiered October 13, 2014, and it grossed about $88 million worldwide, with around $43 million domestic. Critics jumped on it in a way people did not expect, and the film quickly became more than a revenge story. It became a comeback that did not feel like a comeback announcement. It just felt like a man showing up, doing the work, and letting the work speak. And then, the franchise kept growing. By the time John Wick Chapter 4 premiered on March 24, 2023, reports about his base salary jumped into a whole new bracket, with one common figure being $15 million. People also love to point out how few words he spoke in the film, with one viral number saying about 380 words, and fans even did the math to show how wild the earnings were per line. It became a running joke online, but underneath the joke was something real. He had turned quiet intensity into a signature, and the world leaned in closer because of it. He also kept rewarding the people who helped him survive those films. After John Wick wrapped in 2014, there is a widely repeated story that he gifted the stunt team custom Harley-Davidson motorcycles and personally delivered them with a message about how they risked their lives. There are similar stories from the Matrix era too. Later, for John Wick Chapter 4, reports spread that he gave personalized Rolex watches to stunt team members, engraved with thanks, plus shirts that joked about the body count. Whether people focus on the watches or the bikes, the pattern is the same. He treats the crew like family, and he backs it up with action. Then, as his public life settled into something steadier, a new connection entered quietly and grew slowly, the way his deepest bonds always seemed to. In 2009, at a private dinner party in Los Angeles, Keanu met artist Alexandra Grant. There were no agents pushing it, no set photos, no scripted meet-cute. It was a room of artists and thinkers, and they talked for hours. They spoke about literature, painting, and grief. And friends said Alexandra did not do the surface-level talk people expect at parties. She met him in the deep end. At that time, Keanu was still carrying the weight of what happened in 1999 and 2001. And soon the internet would also turn him into a meme, with the sad Keanu photo going viral around 2010. But that dinner in 2009 was not about the internet. It was about two people finding a shared language when the world outside felt loud. Their bond became creative before it became public romance. In 2011, Alexandra did something bold and playful. She took a poem Keanu wrote while mocking sad songs at a house party. And without telling him, she illustrated it with ink drawings and turned it into a small hardcover book called Ode to Happiness. She hid it inside a larger travel book and surprised him at dinner on February 13, 2011, tied to an LACMA moment. Friends reacted like it was the funniest and sweetest ambush, and they pushed him to publish it. Keanu was stunned, not just because it was clever, but because it touched his sadness without shaming it. And it turned that heaviness into something you could hold and laugh at. Later, they went further with a project that felt even more personal. For Shadows, published in February 2016 by Stidle, Alexandra photographed Keanu in stark, intimate ways, capturing silhouettes and fragments that were meant to reflect how grief shifts as time passes. The photos were shot during 2014 and 2015, around breaks in his John Wick filming period, and the work was shown in Los Angeles at LACMA Gallery through March 12, 2016. It was not a polished celebrity art stunt. It looked like two people trusting each other enough to make something raw, and the rawness was the point. By July 19, 2017, they made their partnership official in a new way when they co-founded Ex-Artists Books in Los Angeles with designer Jessica Fleischmann. It grew from their belief in unusual art books and projects that did not fit clean commercial molds. It also showed how their bond was not built on fame. It was built on shared taste, shared effort, and a shared need to make something honest. Then, in 2019, the world finally saw what had been quietly forming. On November 2, 2019, at the LACMA Art and Film Gala, Keanu and Alexandra appeared holding hands. The internet reacted instantly, but the moment itself felt calm. It felt like two people choosing to stand beside each other without flinching. Reports and friends suggested they had been dating privately for a while by then, and the public debut did not look like a publicity push. It looked like a decision to stop hiding. Even the place they returned to after the noise tells its own story. Keanu bought a Hollywood Hills home in 2003, often described as being on Thrasher Avenue in the Bird Streets area, with details like a koi pond courtyard and a long infinity-style pool looking out over the skyline. There have been stories of break-ins and security upgrades, which is the dark side of fame that most people never want to face. Still, the home is often described as a quiet base, not a palace built for showing off. It fits the same pattern as everything else in his life. After all the loss, after the chaos, after the crowds, the thing he seems to keep choosing is a life that feels real when the cameras are gone.